This week's Parsha is Parshat Balak. Parshat Balak is a Parsha that takes us out of the perspective that the Torah usually has. All of the stories in the Torah up to this point have been the stories from the perspective of the people of Israel, the perspective of the people of Israel leaving Egypt and wandering in the desert and then going towards the land of Israel. But this is a Parsha that actually takes us outside of the perspective of the people of Israel and gives us the perspective from a neighboring nation, the nation of Midian, that are interested in hiring a prophet who will curse the Jewish people and kind of put some sort of spell over them so that this other nation can conquer them. So why does the Torah have to take us outside of the perspective of the Jewish people? You know, if we're really in touch with the creator of everything and the one who has the power behind everything in the universe, why is it that the Torah sort of tells us this perspective of a people and then takes us outside of that perspective in order to give us this entire story of a neighboring nation? Well, the Midrash actually has a very interesting kind of combination of all these different types of stories. And it says that when the beginning of the book of Exodus, we have this verse that talks about there was a decision to enslave the Jewish people. The decision to enslave the Jewish people begins with this verse, Hava nitchak malo. Let us be wise, or let us be cunning towards this nation. So it's a voice coming from outside of the people of Israel, a voice in Pharaoh's court, in which some of these advisors are all talking together and saying, let us be cunning towards the Jewish people. Let us figure out a plan on how to deal with the Jewish people. And the Midrash says that there were three people that were present in that room. The first one was Bilam. The second one was Job. And then the third one was Yitro, the famous father-in-law of Moses, who gave his daughter Tzipporah to Moses. Bilam was the one who invented the idea of enslavement. Bilam is the one who who actually gave the advice to Pharaoh. And that word ya'atz, that advice, is actually a verse taken from a different verse later on. Eov, the second figure, Job, listened. He listened and he didn't say anything. He was silent, he withdrew, meaning that he was basically in accord with Bilam's advice. And then the third one was Jethro, who actually took a different opinion and said, no, we can't enslave this Jewish people. The Midrash says that Bilam, who was the one who gave this advice, he was ultimately judged with death, with being killed. That was his punishment. Job, who was silent, was punished by all the afflictions of the book of Job. And then the third figure, Jethro, who went and gave a different opinion, had to run away, but his ultimate reward was that his children are now part of the Jewish people, and they serve in the temple. Now, this midrash has so many interpretations that it's beyond describing, but what's really interesting is these are three figures who represent this outside perspective. They represent the perspective of the other looking into the Jewish people. And with the case of Bilam, and with the case of Eov, and with the case of Yitro, each one of these people ultimately make a contribution to the Torah. So Bilam's verses are verses that are now an integral part of our prayer. And the most famous one, perhaps, is Ma Tovu, which we sing in the morning, Ma Tovu Ohalecha Yaakov. This verse is like a very central part of our prayer. So that comes from Bilam. That comes from Bilam's curses, which were turned into blessings. Eov contributed an entire book to the Tanakh that is one of the most theologically rich books that talks about this idea of suffering in the world. And Jethro also contributed a whole section in the Torah that talks about our system of justice and how to create peace among the people. So what the Midrash actually could be saying to us is that the Torah feels that it's necessary for the Jewish people to always be thinking about this idea of how we appear from the outside. That is, the story of the Jewish people, as much as it's an insular story, is relevant because it also has a kind of a counterpart in other that it creates. And those people looking in from the outside, they are essential contributors to the whole story of the Jewish people. Bilam is an essential contributor to the Jewish people. Bilam's contribution is the contribution of the sword. The sword is a metaphor for prayer. There's a type of a person who comes in and they have a very piercing spiritual energy. This is the type of person like Bilam. It's an outsider who comes in who's able to bring this piercing energy of the sword, these verses that are like piercing prayer. Job is the person who comes in as the thinker, the philosopher. Job is able to contribute this book of Job. And Jethro is the person of peace who contributes the search, the rational search for orderly organization of society. All of these people are people that see the Jewish people from the outside, and their contributions are integral to the Jewish people. So what the Torah is telling us is, as much as we are the chosen nation in this story that we are telling, we also always need to remember that the story is a call for people from the outside to come in. And the call for the outside to come in is a call to integrate and to take these different types of spiritual contributions and make them part of the Torah. So I wish you a good chance to contemplate this week's Parsha, and a Shabbat Shalom.